Good evening and welcome to the Board of Trustees meeting for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, February 26. If you are watching live on Monday, February 26, I encourage you to call in if you have comments or questions. Our call-in number is 769-1677. Our next regular meeting will be held on Monday, March 12 at 8 p.m. with a work session at 7. A couple of announcements to make, the first of which is those of you who've been watching are aware that we're in the midst of plans for a partly state-supported, grant-supported program to improve the streetscape along Manville Road, and as part of that also to create a new civic space at the north end. That would be the Manville Road end of Memorial Plaza. We have a public meeting on that subject a week from today in this room, Monday, March 5 at 7 p.m. And encourage folks who are interested in that either to tune in or to visit. So we have a bunch of other announcements and correspondence to report on, but I think the first act tonight is the happy occasion of the promotion of a police officer to detective. I invite Chief Grutzner to introduce that.
Good evening, Mayor Shearer, Village Trustees, Village Administrator Dwyer, Mr. Morrissey, members, family, and friends of the Pleasantville Police Department and the Pleasantville community. As the Mayor said in his remarks, we're here this evening to officially make Police Officer Joe Zane a detective. Now, technically, this is not a promotion ceremony. It looks like a promotion. Joe gets to work in plain clothes, and he's not assigned to work overnights anymore. And I'm sure to Joe and his family, it feels like a promotion. However, technically, this is not a promotion, and I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you how the system works and why this distinction is important. In New York, all promotions are subject to civil service law. Civil service law states that only the top 3 candidates on a civil service promotional list are eligible to be considered. That means that every time someone gets promoted, they have only 2 other people with whom they are in contention. However, for an assignment, which is what this really is an assignment to detective, I can pick from a much larger pool of candidates. Almost everyone in the department can be an eligible candidate. When we held interviews for the detective's position a few months ago, Joe was one of 7 officers who put his or her name in for consideration. The selection process was lengthy. Lieutenant Woolman, Lieutenant Liswan, and I sought the input of all the patrol sergeants and a number of senior patrol officers, as well as the outgoing detective sergeant, Jason Henkin, and the current detective. And while Joe was by no means the only person who was recommended to us, his name was offered to us many times in the course of those conversations. Each of the 7 officers that we interviewed was qualified, articulate, and passionate about this opportunity to serve the residents in a new and exciting way. Many came with unique ideas about how to improve the way we do things. Their diverse strengths and abilities made selecting just one difficult, but that is a good problem for a chief to have. I would like to thank the other candidates for the way they have responded to Joe securing this assignment. Everyone has embraced and supported Joe in his new role. Most all of them are here tonight, and that is a testament to their personality and professionalism. Joe has always been a talented and proactive police officer. He has a keen eye for detail and a strong ability to read people, 2 skills that were important on the road and that will serve him well in his new assignment. He's been a tremendous asset to this department while on patrol, and I am confident that his abilities will make him an especially good detective. While this may not technically be a promotion ceremony, Joe being made detective was in fact a more impressive feat than a promotion, and it is truly well deserved. While I'm sure Joe feels lucky that he is being reassigned, we in the department and the community at large are easily as lucky to have him. Mr. Mayor.
Joe, if you'd come forward for the swearing in. You raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Zane,
I, Joseph Zane,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the codes of the Village of Pleasantville,
the codes of the Village of Pleasantville,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of police detective
the duties of police detective
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
So is that none of us want to take the responsibility to poke you with a pin and invite your wife Johanna.
She wants to film.
Here's your chance to draw blood.
Congratulations.
So I wanted to thank the chief, the lieutenants, and the entire police force, a significant percentage of which has shown up tonight for this occasion, and we thank you very much for that support for your department. All of us here are pleased and proud by the great progress that's been made by PPD and appreciate what you all do for us on a daily basis. So thank you very much. So we'll just jump ahead to you're free to leave.
Free to go.
I don't want to stay. Enjoy.
Good night.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Chief.
So the sharp-eyed viewers among us will notice over here a new face on the left side of the table. That is our left. Welcome Eric Morrissey. Eric is going to be our new village administrator. Patty, as we have commented several times in the past, is hanging up her spurs on March 16. Eric joined us last week, and the two are overlapping for a month or so, at which point, when Patty departs, Eric will be the new village administrator. Eric is well known to lots of us because he spent 6 years, am I right, in the governmental affairs position at Pace University, in which capacity he spoke to many of us in government, but also many folks throughout the community. And so we view that as an enormous asset, not only because Eric starts out at second base in terms of his knowledge of the community, maybe even having rounded second, headed into third, and also because it gave us an opportunity to see his good work in the work he did for Pace and the relationship here with Pleasantville. So not only are we delighted to welcome you, Eric, we are also delighted by the idea that it will strengthen an already strong relationship with Pace because of the deep relationship you have there. Eric comes to us most directly from a couple of years stint working in the village of Croton, and so apologies to the village of Croton for swiping him, but congratulations to the village of Pleasantville. Delighted to have you here, Eric.
Thank you very much.
So,
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on any subject tonight? Welcome, Helen. That's okay. Turn it however you're comfortable.
Good evening, Helen Muir, 3 Hayes Hill
You
Road.
can lift it down there. You don't have to. Yeah, there you go.
Just reminding everybody that Films on Purpose has their next showing this Thursday at the Presbyterian Church. We're showing Which Way Home, which is a film about child immigrants traveling on freight trains up through Mexico to come into the United States, about 1 in every 20 people riding those freight trains, all of whom are illegal. 1 in 20 is a kid. And the show is at the Presbyterian Church, reception at 6, film at 7, in conjunction with Neighbours Link.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Helen.
Helen.
Any further comment on any subject? Call in number 769-1677. All right, so let me bounce back. We had a few other announcements to make. I mentioned Eric's arrival in our midst. Welcome, Eric. There's a village election on Tuesday, March 20. The petitions have been filed, and we are sorry to report that Colleen has decided not to run again, and we will have some opportunities to thank her for her service on organization night. At the moment, it is an uncontested election. I am running for mayor. Joe Stargiotti is running for re-election as trustee, and David Vinjamuri, who's here in the audience tonight, is the candidate for the other trustee position. Despite the fact that there are only 3 candidates for 3 positions on the ballot, we encourage folks to vote. The election is on Tuesday, March 20. This year, unlike past years, the village election is being handled by the County Board of Elections. The result of that is that the whole thing has a good bit more, I don't know what the right term is.
Administration.
Administrative baggage attached to it. And unlike former village elections where folks have voted only in one place, typically here at Village Hall, this year the county board insists that it's necessary to open up multiple polling places in various districts. So, Judy, am I correct that folks will vote in the same location they vote in national elections,
Yes.
with the exception of folks that would normally vote at the school?
Correct. District 13 and 14 they haven't determined yet, but it should be here. Well, I'm just waiting for their confirmation.
Okay, so at any rate,
How can they determine that location? I'm just thinking for posting on Facebook. How can they determine what their polling location is if for some reason they're not aware of what their...
Someone?
Yeah.
The county should be sending cards. so
Actually,
that
I
they're
got a
doing-
card that said that my polling place was going to be where it normally is, which is the school. It didn't say the school, it just said you'll vote where you normally vote.
Right.
So, the
except that you
information's not
won't in the
great,
case
you
of the
know.
school,
They
right?
have an online, thing where you can type your
They
address
have to
in.
do an inspection here, even though they're not, I told them that we're handicap accessible. They're going to do an inspection, and as soon as they come, they will be sending cards out.
Can you just maybe follow up with them and see if they can get here, like the earlier the better, and the determination the earlier the better, so that
Right.
Nicole can post it
We
on
can put it up.
Facebook, and,
Yeah.
because I mean, March 20th is,
It's
happening, in my world it's happening tomorrow, like, everything comes so quickly,
Absolutely.
so.
I'll call them tomorrow.
All right, so more on that, and you can check out our Facebook page. You want to make a pitch for that?
The Facebook page? I feel a bit guilty because between being sick for a month and away for a while, I've lapsed a little bit. But we encourage everyone to join the Village Facebook page if they have not done so already. The more numbers we have tuning in, the more effective it will be as a tool of communication, not only of our village business, but a way for you to contact us as well. The easiest way to find it is to go to the homepage of the village website. There's a Facebook icon in the upper right-hand corner. If you click on that, it will direct you to it. So please like us or join us if you have not done so yet.
Great, thank you. A couple of announcements that were on my list. One is I had a meeting earlier, and I've had several meetings with Will Promisel, who's a Pleasantville High School student and an Eagle Scout candidate. His project is to assist all of us in establishing automatic defibrillators at each of the village fields. And in that connection, part of his Eagle Scout project involves a spaghetti dinner fundraiser to help raise money to buy this equipment. And he's pinned down the date for that, which is Sunday, April 22, a bit in the distance, but it's a Sunday evening, probably 6 to 8 p.m. at the Presbyterian Church, a fundraising dinner to assist Will in achieving his goal to help to fund this. So we'll have more to say about that, and he'll be getting out further information, but we have benefited many times by these Eagle Scout projects, and Will's is a very good one. I've mentioned also that the 14th annual Pleasantville Music Festival is on July 14. But the important thing to remember right now is that tent sites for this year's festival in the Tent City area are going to go on sale this Saturday, March 3rd, starting at 9 a.m. and at the Rec Center office. The Rec Center office will be open between 9 and noon this Saturday, March 3. Cash or check only, sites sold on a first-come, first-served basis. If there are any remaining sites after the closing of sales at noon on Saturday, they'll be sold at the Rec Center office on weekdays between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. So any of you who are interested in having your own tent site at the music festival, get thee to the Rec Center on Saturday, March 3. Earlier the better. Sales begin at 9 a.m. Other folks have announcements?
Do you want to mention the road closures?
Oh, yes, why don't you go ahead?
So if you've been driving around Pleasantville Friday or again today, you've noticed that Church Street and Broadway, that whole intersection of that area has been closed So a utility pole came down on Friday that was right at the intersection, so there was no choice but to close the traffic down Church Street to that intersection on Broadway and back to the Lake Street intersection on Broadway, and then again at the intersection at Hayes Hill where Michael's is, because there was no other way to keep people from driving over the wires. So that was repaired on Friday. That made everybody's Friday evening commute fun. This morning, a truck drove through the wires that had been hung on the replacement pole and pulled them all back down again. So that was closed again today. I believe we've had some indications that that is almost done and will be reopened shortly, but we appreciate everybody's patience with it. I was trying to drive there this afternoon late as well, and it was a pretty busy intersection at Lake Street. A lot of people were going straight onto Nannyhagen. So I appreciate everybody's patience. Nobody expected this to happen, certainly not happen again so soon. It's not something we predict, but again, thank everybody for driving carefully, driving slowly, and understanding that it's a little town and sometimes we have to thread our way through stuff that comes up unexpectedly. Should be back in order tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple announcements. The first is Pleasantville SEPTA, which is a wonderful organization that's in all 3 of our schools, is hosting a special event at the Jacob Burns this Wednesday at 7 o'clock. They're showing a film called Summer in the Forest, which is a really beautiful film. It's a French film with English subtitles. And it's about 4 young boys who, in Europe, were labeled idiots, what they called, and were locked away in an asylum, and they were freed, and they created this community. And it just goes to show what can happen when you give someone a chance. So you can call the Burns directly or go to Pleasantville SEPTA's website. The same evening at 7 o'clock, Pleasantville Strong is having their coalition meeting at the high school. On Saturday, the 3rd, from 9 to 1:30, Pleasantville Strong is hosting a parent university at our high school, at the middle school, high school. And what you can do is go to our website and sign up for one of 7 different classes that we'll be hosting. We'll be doing one set at 9:30 and one set at 10:45 on lots of different topics. So one is mindfulness, we're doing one on suicide, mental illness, date rape, all sorts of different topics where alcohol or substance abuse can affect. And we have all sorts of different speakers that will be coming. So we really encourage everyone to do that. And then lastly, on March 25th from 9 to 5, we'll have a youth mental health first aid training class at the library. So I'm sure that many people know that we had another tragedy hit one of the families here in Pleasantville, and youth mental health first aid, I think, is a fabulous way to sort of support in any way that you can as a non-professional, a youth that may be experiencing a crisis. So it's free, it's underwritten by Pleasantville Strong, it's an 8-hour course, but it's a great course. So you can go to our website as well and sign up for that class.
Great, thank you. Further?
I just wanted to say that I've been working with Carolyn Ramsey, a local resident who is a landscape designer who's helping us for a project for a primarily native plant habitat garden that's going to be designed for the new traffic island on Manville next to Rebecca Avenue. So that's something in the works, and I'm hoping that we'll have a design that we can show people relatively soon.
All right, anything else? A couple of further things from me. I went 2 weeks ago to the annual New York Conference of Mayors Legislative Conference in Albany, which takes place on Sunday and Monday, and then is followed up on Tuesday by a visit to the state capitol to meet with the various senators and assembly people who represent Westchester. So I am, as I was last year, the chair of the Westchester Municipal Officials Legislative Committee, and we have a document that lists about 25 legislative priorities, and we highlighted 5 of them that were special priorities. Those are not all specific priorities for the Village of Pleasantville, but represent sort of group speak among the 45 municipalities throughout Westchester. So it was an interesting visit, frustrating in some ways, as it always is. But we had an interesting, and I think in some respects more productive visit with the Westchester delegation than we have in some years past. So I intend to do a PCTV show to sort of dig into that in a little bit more detail. And so for those who are particularly interested in state government or our policy wongs in general, I'll let you know when that is recorded and up. But short version of a long story is that a number of the things that are particular concerns for the Village of Pleasantville, particularly unfunded mandates and some of the irrational aspects of the tax cap, are unlikely to be addressed in any way. And it was useful at least to get a candid response from the senators and assembly people and their staff about the subjects that just weren't going to go anywhere this year, so that we can focus on our energy in places where we could see some progress. So more on that later. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is review of written comments regarding the reusable bag initiative. For those of you who follow us regularly, several weeks ago we had a public hearing on a proposed local law that would have established a ban on single-use plastic bags, the flimsy grocery kind of bags that are distributed by many stores. The draft local law, which came out of quite a bit of work done by Pleasantville Recycles, proposed a ban on single-use bags with various exemptions for things like dry cleaning bags, produce bags, etc., and proposed a 5-cent fee on paper bags, the purpose of which was to seek to encourage folks to use reusable bags. There was quite a bit of comment. The public hearing went on for a long time. Those of you who were here or see it on PCTV, which you can pull up on an on-demand webcast whenever you want at pctv76.org. I would say in terms of the number of speakers, the vast majority of the commentators were in favor of some action on a reusable bag ordinance. The representative of the Food Industry Alliance, which is a lobby group for retail, grocery, and convenience stores, spoke against the idea of a ban, as did representatives from Key Foods, who were particularly concerned about the idea that it wasn't a level playing field if one community establishes a regulation of this kind and their close competitors in other towns are not covered by it. So quite a bit of discussion has gone on since then. We received a 3-page memo from Jay Peltz, from the Food Industry Alliance, which was a follow-up to comments he made the night of the public hearing. And the thrust of his presentation is that they would very much prefer, as I think would their member Key Foods, a law that mirrors a law that was passed and effective January 1 in Suffolk County, which is a 5-cent fee on both paper and plastic, but no ban. So there's been a lot of discussion on that, and today I attended, as did Nicole and 4 members of Pleasantville Recycles, a meeting that was organized by Chris Burdick, the supervisor in Bedford, up in Bedford, that convened a bunch of communities, Pleasantville area and north for the most part, all of them talking about the idea of some sort of a reusable bag initiative, and considering the idea that it might be possible to have some coordinated effort so a bunch of communities might pass the same kind of legislation. Whether that turns out to be realistic is an open question, but among the questions in play here to address the idea of level playing field is the idea that at least adjacent communities might have somewhat similar laws, and also the question of whether Westchester County may at some point take this matter up and provide a countywide law, which is what has happened in Suffolk County. Want to add anything to that story today from today's meeting?
No, just that it was interesting to see that there are quite a few municipalities throughout Westchester that are considering some version of a reusable bag initiative, and you know, it was very educational to see the different concerns that different types of communities have, and I think it was a good step towards building sort of alliances and working towards a more even playing field.
So I think the big question that sits before this board is going to be the question of whether the law or some version of the law that was presented for public hearing, which is closely modeled on the Newcastle law, is the way we ought to go. I add to that we have some advice of counsel that suggested some tweaks to that. Or alternatively, and again, that local law proposed a ban on single-use plastic and a 5-cent fee on paper. I hasten to add, which I didn't think I mentioned up until now, that fee remains with the merchant, as it's not a government tax or anything of that kind. The merchant keeps it. And the idea of all of this is to try to get people to transition to reusable bags, to bringing their own bags and produce less waste all the way around. So the two options that are clearly the decision that we confront is whether the ban on plastic with a fee on paper is the way to go, or alternatively, whether some version of a fee on plastic and a fee on paper, which is the Suffolk County model in general, might be a better way to go. And we heard some pretty convincing arguments, I think, both ways today.
Right, and a staggered approach has also been suggested. We think possibly with the support of Key Foods, of beginning with a fee model and moving towards a ban. But yeah, it was interesting to hear different arguments and different research, both in terms of the impact that this has on businesses and so on, and also in terms of the environmental considerations of the different models that have been proposed.
So in this subject, I speak only for myself, but I think some of us may agree. I think it's pretty clear that throwing away bags of any kind is a significant problem for the country. I mean, the numbers mentioned today are quite staggering. Mount Kisco, for example, a representative from Mount Kisco believes that somewhere on the order of 12 million bags are distributed in Mount Kisco every year. So it gives you an idea of the extent of the problem. And it is also pretty clear that paper and plastic both have their environmental footprint and their environmental problems. And at least from my standpoint, the primary goal of all of this is not so much to say you should use paper instead of plastic, because that is itself a problem. Nobody wants to pass a law that eliminates plastic and causes the use of paper bags to explode. From my standpoint, the real goal here is to sort of create a little bump in the daily road that all of us travel that causes folks to say, hey, something has been presented to me, potentially in the form of a fee for bags, that reminds me of the fact that there are impacts to the way I'm living, and that it's a relatively easy matter to take some action to use reusable bags and to avoid that impact. So I can also report, again, speaking for myself, that having transitioned to using reusable bags, I am way happier with that as a convenience factor. And when I forget to bring a bag, it's highly annoying, because it's so much easier to pack a nice square bag with a rigid bottom and to carry it out to the car and to carry it into the house from there. So anybody else want to add anything to that?
I'm just curious when we're going to have our work session on the law that we had the public hearing on, so we can either move forward with that or work through whatever changes we may choose to make to it, or whatever it is. And I'm also curious if we're moving forward on the secret forms, Patty, because we're going to have to do that if we adopt any law, whatever it is.
Well,
Right?
I think once we put the law in the form that you're willing to consider for adoption, that's when we need to do a secret designation and declaration on it, because we don't know the final form yet. So to do an undertaking of an environmental review on what we have in front of us, knowing it'll change, is really not.
We don't know that's going to change.
Well, we know that we have advice of counsel that
Yeah,
suggests that we change what we have in place right now as
From my
draft
perspective,
legislation.
we know that we have a local law upon which we had a public hearing.
But you are in receipt of the letter from counsel that advises us to make some changes in it.
I'm in receipt of a letter from council, yes. I
So-
saw it, I read it.
Okay, which is to say you can accept or not accept that.
I just
But-
don't
right.
want to stall on
Yeah.
moving
I
forward
completely agree.
with an initiative. Whatever the outcome may be, whether we make changes or don't make changes, whatever, I just want to keep moving forward. We have this tonight where
Right.
we're discussing,
Yeah.
you know, we have comments from the public, so great. I want to schedule a not a public hearing, a work session so we
So
can
I
work through
totally
this.
support that.
That's
So
all.
let's have that work session our next meeting,
And
March 12th.
I mean, I mirror that. I think that for some people, they think that it's just been the last couple of months, but I mean, I've been on the board for 6 years, and this was presented years ago. The folks at Recycles, and all the people that have just, grabbed onto this and educated the public and educated us, I think it's time for us to do something. And maybe there's going to be different iterations of what we end up with, but, I don't think that we always have to wait for what everybody else does. Maybe we need to be the leader and do something. And if in a couple of months we decide, the county is suggesting this, or our neighbors are all going to do that, we could always change it. But I don't think we need to wait any longer.
I certainly-
I don't think we're waiting. I'm just
You're right.
making sure we're taking the next step.
I think
that's all.
at today's meeting,
there's always gonna
with
be-
7 or 8 communities together, we were all obviously interested in the idea the county might take action, but nobody was inclined to wait for the county to take action.
Right.
One positive thing out of individual communities taking action, particularly if they coalesce around a given strategy, is that it helps apply some pressure to the county when the significant percentage of the communities have. So we'll schedule a work session for our next meeting.
I'd be really interested
which
to
is
know
Monday, March
more
12th.
at the work
Right.
session about what the other communities, like what their thoughts are on it as well. I'd be-
Which we will. And Chris Burdick is going to put together not minutes, but a summary of the discussion. So, actually, that meeting today in Bedford led off with a telephone exchange with the county legislator in Suffolk, who led the process that in the end resulted in the law they have, which morphed a bit over time as well. So it was instructive, I thought.
I thought it was instructive too. I will say that over the course of the meeting, my perspective on the ideal legislation shifted somewhat. I came out with a more nuanced view, and I feel like a lot more information on how these things sort of end up working in the long run. If you put pressure in a certain direction, then you encourage people to use more paper bags and things like that. So I think it warrants a work session. I agree with Colleen and with you, Joe, that this is not something that we want to put on a back burner. I think we really want to make it a priority and move ahead, as quickly as possible. And I think that, in comparison with some of the other municipalities, thanks to the work of Pleasantville Recycles, we're already further along than a lot of other municipalities. And personally, I'm proud of the idea that we could be a leader in what clearly is a trend moving forward. But I do think that there are some things that are worthy of discussion.
Absolutely.
In terms of community buy-in, in terms of sort of the long-term implications of certain choices that we make in the sort of nuts and bolts of the legislation.
The idea is about in my view, the most effective legislation, not necessarily the strongest on its face, but the most effective, something that's going to affect the change that we want to affect in the best and perhaps least painful.
I think in some ways what we're talking about is a cultural shift. I mean, I keep thinking of it as a shift back to what had been the cultural norm, not that long ago. And so it's not just about legislating. In a lot of ways, it's about making it a community project, that everyone ideally gets on board with, of reducing our waste,
Sure.
So, and let me just add to that a brief shout out to Richard Groman at Key Foods. I've spoken to him several times since that public hearing, and I know folks at Pleasantville Recycles have done so too. And he remains concerned, as mentioned, about the level playing field issue, but he's been quite interested, quite cooperative, and I feel like the groundwork is laid for a good, strong relationship there.
Great.
So good stuff going on there. All right.
So, Mr. Mayor, should we put this on work session so you can,
Yes.
collect your thoughts?
Let's
and
put
maybe
that on work session for the
counsel
next
it?
meeting
I
as
think that
well.
would be helpful.
Yeah. So then the last announcement I had, following up to correspondence that we talked about last time, is, as you know, we have received a preliminary proposal from the folks at Sunrise Senior Living to revise the project they originally proposed for a mixed senior assisted living project, and instead to build a smaller project, about 40 units, that would be entirely focused on memory care at the site adjacent to the Methodist Church that has been the subject of much discussion in the past. So We've invited Jerry Liang of Sunrise to come visit us next meeting, which is on Monday, March 12. And it's my thought that we invite Jerry to make a brief presentation about the proposal that they have put on the table at our televised session, so folks have an opportunity to see it. And then give folks the week following an opportunity to give any feedback they may have to all of us, with the idea that the second meeting in March, the board members would be in a position to respond to what Sunrise has requested of us, which is to say, let us know your preliminary views about this and whether it's a project worth pursuing. Does that feel like a reasonable way forward to everybody?
Yes. Good.
Okay, so Monday, March 12, at our televised session, we'll have Jerry Liang of Sunrise here. He'll make a presentation to describe the project, and the community will have a chance to see it. So, all right. Is there a motion to open a public hearing on a local law amending Chapter 182 Wetlands of the Village Code?
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
Welcome to a public hearing that we're shortly going to close. I leave it to Steve, who's been the leader on this on the board and liaison to the Conservation Advisory Committee, to explain.
Sure, so I'll just give a brief summary of the law that's the subject of the public hearing tonight, what has happened subsequent to that, and the various things that will be eventually, I think, reflected in the language that we do adopt. So the original idea of the wetlands ordinance revisit, I guess, is to bring our wetlands ordinance up to speed with basically the rest of the county. A lot of other towns around us have different elements within their wetlands ordinances, and we wanted to tweak ours to bring it into line with some of the other thinking around us. Things like adopting a 100-foot buffer instead of 50 feet. We only have a 50-foot buffer to wetlands. We don't have very many wetlands left in Pleasantville, so the ones that we do have, we feel need to be protected. Installation of, the language that you see in the public record document, that amendment, or the amendments to that language, deal with things like not putting in service conduits, cable conduits, things that weren't necessarily as high on the radar as they were back when the ordinance was first written. Also including not clear-cutting trees. That's also an issue, that has been an issue. Removal and cutting of vegetation as you get closer to the wetlands obviously changes the impact into the wetlands. And then various pollution control items that we wanted to have in there. The other thing we wanted to do was to make specific reference to a detailed map of the wetlands areas, and our Conservation Advisory Council has done a tremendous amount of work, and two of them are here, thank you very much, for doing that kind of legwork to actually really dig into what are the wetlands we have, where are they, how far do they extend, looking at FEMA maps, looking at floodplain maps, things like that, to really map out where these areas lie, where the buffers lie, and what we need to do to make sure we understand how they all fit together. The other thing we wanted to do in this ordinance was to increase some of the duties of the applicant in terms of their requirements and their obligations to mitigate any disturbances of the wetlands that we do have. And we also wanted to move toward a 500-year floodplain as opposed to a 100-year floodplain, which is what we have now. You don't need to watch the Weather Channel very long to realize that we're having 500-year floods a lot more frequently than even 100 years anymore. So we wanted to adjust all of that. Now, subsequent to this being noticed, we had a meeting with Jeff Econom, our Superintendent of Public Works, and Robert Hughes, our Building Inspector, with the CAC to work through their input into the ordinance that we had, the language we had on the table, and make sure it gelled well with what they see out there on a daily basis. Those guys are on the firing line and see where what we would love to have in an ordinance is going to impact the daily lives of our residents. So the outcome of that meeting is going to introduce some tweaks to the language that was noticed for the hearing tonight. So some of those things include, we are going to go to a 100-foot buffer. We're going to probably split out the 500-year floodplain language from the 100-foot to 500-foot, sorry, the 50-foot to 100-foot buffer language, so that that's very clearly delineated into two different things. We are probably going to put an RFP out for a surveying group to come in and actually lay out by GPS coordinates where the wetlands are. And we're also thinking of creating a panel that will review applications that may touch a wetland, so that it is not necessarily a very long, expensive, and tedious process before the Planning Commission. and be able to adjudicate some of those things quickly and easily with this panel that would consist of various members, either of the CAC and Robert Hughes, the building inspector, the village engineer, and things like that. So those are the changes that we want to introduce into the language that was noticed for tonight. We haven't got that new draft yet. So I think the idea is that we've opened this. We'd like to hear anybody's thoughts that would like to give them, but we will probably go back, recreate or add these edits, have a new draft that we can, I guess, notice again.
And have another
public hearing. So our initial thinking was we were going to move this hearing tonight because we did have these edits to the draft, but it had already been noticed, and we don't like to move a public hearing once it's been noticed. So that's the summary.
Thank you for that. Excellent job. Recognizing all that Steve has said and the fact that we'll be back at this again with a revision, we're happy to receive any comments anybody might have tonight, either present here in the audience or call in at 769-1677.
If I didn't say something that I should have, you guys, if they were there at the meeting. Okay.
Is there going to be a forum for discussing, for instance, you called it a panel, the sort of the advisory committee that's going to be formed? One of the issues that was raised was we'd like it to have some teeth, right, so that it could actually
be effective.
Really, apply this ordinance.
Yeah, we did talk.
Is there a forum in which that could be discussed, the logistics of that? How do we do that moving forward?
I can give you where we kind of hammered it out during this meeting, if that would help.
Oh, in the follow-up meeting.
Yeah,
Okay,
so in the follow-up meeting.
Could you bring us up to speed
Sure.
on that?
Jeff has had experience with this kind of thing in another municipality, where they basically had a 3-member panel that consisted of the village engineer, or the town engineer, I think in that case, right?
Yeah.
The building inspector, and then 1 member of the CAC. And what we wanted to do was expand that to 4 and make sure that it was either a unanimous decision or at least 3 out of the 4, so that you weren't in a position where, depending down the road who's in what chair, either the environmental concerns are steamrolled, essentially, right? So we wanted to have it in a way where if we have 2 members of the CAC, or there was talk of maybe one of us being on that, or something like that, where it was at least one of those other 2 people, not the village engineer, not the building inspector, had to concur. And the functioning of it is, right now, all of this has to go to the planning commission, and that's a long time. It's tedious, it's expensive, and what we want to do is if you find your backyard is now going to be in this expanded buffer zone and you want to build a shed, that is a thing that with the proper people on this panel can probably be discussed and dealt with right there. And then either the committee can't come to an agreement, it goes up to the planning commission, or the applicant doesn't like the decision and brings it to the planning commission. So that avenue would still be there. But if there's the capability for this panel or committee to deal with that lower level stuff there as it relates to wetlands, then it would. So, because like right now, anything that looks like it may come near a wetland is immediately, if I understand the process right, sent that way. So, the radar is already up around this stuff. This would just give us another way to get this stuff sort of talked through and adjudicated really one way or the other in a more efficient way, right? All of it obviously still subject to planning commission review, which is the system that we have now.
So Steve, I looked at the ordinance again today because I was thinking about all these amendments and I wanted to see what our current ordinance says.
Right.
To my understanding, the way I read it, there are certain activities that are permitted in a wetland, the wetland buffer, whatever, they're permitted by right. There are other things that are permitted but only with the permission of the building inspector.
Right.
And then there are other activities like constructing a building or something, more invasive, that are permitted only with the permission of the planning commission in the context of a site plan approval or a subdivision or just a plain old wetlands permit, which has a process in the ordinance. So not everything goes to planning board right now. Some things can go, or as of right, and some things go to the building inspector. So
you're right.
We need to figure out this whole. So we're talking about another layer of administration of another board, which I'm not necessarily against. I just want to understand what we're
I think, we talked a little bit about that with Robert when we had the meeting here, and part of his idea was that if it is a building inspector type of thing, he encouraged the use of this sort of panel, to have the buy-in and make sure that everybody was talking the same language, because he is the one who's confronted with this the most.
Yeah, it
And
was
then,
their idea.
but also, for example, if somebody's going for a site plan approval, they're going to the planning board anyway.
They would probably go right to the planning.
So you wouldn't want to send them to a different board just to
No.
go back to the planning
But
board.
you're saying that Robert would rather have this committee to help him make some of these decisions that are put to him, that he's making the decisions solely?
Right, because it gives him a little bit more involvement, a little bit more cover from a conservation and environmental type of perspective. Things like a site plan approval, I don't think, and you guys can correct me if you want, yeah, come on up if you'd like, please.
Yeah, I'd like
Because
to hear
Helen
what
was
you have
there
to
as well.
say.
Because the idea is not to abrogate the path through to like a site plan approval. It's to give us a mechanism so that not everything goes there.
So if you're looking for just a wetland permit, because it's a sort of thing that requires the permission currently of the planning board, but doesn't require site plan or subdivision, it's just
a thing.
a
they
thing
have
on
to-
its own,
right,
you need a
right.
wetlands permit.
Right.
Instead of going to the planning board, you're talking about going to this new
Right, and they would
administrative
get it
board.
out of the way, and if the people on either side didn't like that decision, they still could go that other route. We're not taking that route away. We're just trying to put a detour in it so that, the idea, the one we kept coming back to was the fellow who's now going to be in a buffer zone that didn't used to be, wants to build a shed, expand the deck, something. That may not rise to the level that has to go all the way to a planning commission. Right now, it sort of has to. Or Robert has to do it, and I think he'd like to have this thing in place as well to help him out do that.
Yeah, it's pretty much it. He was very keen. He sees all of the requests. They all come through him, and then he's basically required to push it up to the planning commission if there's a wetlands issue. And he thought that in some smaller, and I don't really mean in square footage
No.
size, but minimal impact projects, and it could be referred to a panel, and the panel would be fast turnaround, and then if the panel agreed, he would deal with all of the mitigation or whatever suggestions he had to the applicant, whereas if the panel didn't feel it was minimal, it would then go on the normal course. So it shouldn't actually slow anything down, but actually speed up a lot of small applications.
And do you feel like the panel would help with enforcement? Because I know that's been one of the big concerns, right, is whether or not the wetlands ordinance is actually enforced.
I think actually Robert Hughes has done a great job since he's come to the village in noticing on any project whether there was any kind of wetlands intrusion. So I'm hopeful that the most important thing is that we pay attention to the wetlands ordinance, the one we have or any future one, and enforce it. And really only in extreme circumstances should you be doing anything of any size in any wetland buffer, never mind in the wetland. So the panel would help because it would allow people to not be shy about approaching the building inspector to put in a fence or whatever, something small.
That's the other thing
And,
we're trying to do with that is to make it a little bit more of a conversation as
More
opposed to
user-friendly in a way.
Yeah. And the idea, like Helen was saying, is that we don't really want a lot in there to begin with, but there will be, Robert's, I think his biggest concern was that extension of from 50 to 100. There's going to be not a lot. We looked at the maps, but there's going to be some instances where a person may find themselves in a buffer, and that gets dicey because now you're sort of changing that line on them, and we wanted to make sure that they felt there was a fairly simple way to do fairly simple things without opening up a huge can of worms.
Right, and Robert Hughes estimated there's only about 1 to 2 applications a month that would have any relevance to this,
Right.
unless that
Okay.
panel were going to be in charge of other things. But it's
And I think
and it might
if
even
this
be
panel also raises the awareness of these applications, so there's a conversation around them right now, as opposed to kind of just going into a planning commission, and the CAC would be heavily involved in knowing what those applications look like, and what they have in mind, and hopefully,
He also suggested that the applicant should be present when the panel is,
Yes.
the panel were meeting, so it would be like a roundtable discussion, not like a little, oh, we're telling you this. So it would be more
Right. like a conversation.
informal.
Yeah. So the idea is to take the language that we noticed for tonight and wrap all of this into there, and then renotice it, and we'd have to have another public hearing, right?
Correct.
But I think it's a sufficient departure enough where we want to get the language right. But like to your point about the bags, we don't want to lose the initiative on this. We had Robert and Jeff here. They spent a lot of time with us. They definitely gave us a lot of input. So we do want to kind of keep this rolling along.
So what, is it realistic to have that edited in time to posted for public hearing at our next meeting? Obviously, the public hearing wouldn't be at the next meeting, but
Yeah, I'd
to
like to
commit
think
to
so.
posting?
What do you think?
Yeah, well,
I think we can do
we're
it.
going to assign that to our staff,
Right.
to draft it, circulate it out to Helen and CAC, make sure it reads well,
That's
so
what
we
I was
know,
thinking. You gotta make-
that
you
it
guys-
has.
So I don't want to hurry it at the expense of
No,
its
it's not that
comprehensiveness. Is it
difficult.
realistic to
It is,
have that
Absolutely.
potentially as a resolution to post a public hearing
yes,
at the March 12 meeting?
yes.
Oh,
Okay.
One thing we have right now is we have a Pleasantville Wetlands Ordinance, and what we like to use is start with that as a basis, which is what
Right.
we, the CAC, have worked on for a while. Not really very keen on it being another town's ordinance lifted up and then amendments made. We wouldn't have time to review that.
No, I think we're just going to take the one we noticed for tonight and
Right.
tweak the language.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
add in that section about the environmental review panel.
Right.
And the other thing was just, as Steve mentioned, was to separate out the reference to the FEMA
Yes.
floodplains into, I don't know if it's a different ordinance or some separate.
I think it's a separate section of the ordinance.
Section.
We want to split them out so that it's very clear that you're really, because when you look at the map, they're very close to each other.
But they have different attributes.
They have
too.
different attributes, they have different requirements. FEMA treats them differently, FEMA updates them differently, the county, and there's a lot of moving parts to that, so we decided at that meeting it would maybe be a good idea to kind of carve that out, have it be still part of what we're doing, but very, because otherwise it starts to get confusing about exactly which buffer you're in,
Okay.
right?
Plus, it would have probably stay with a 50-foot buffer rather than
Yes,
the
oh,
extended buffer.
thank you, I should say.
Because it's not a true wetland, it's
Right.
an occasional.
So
So
the
if
idea would be
anything
we
that's
go
in
to
the FEMA
500-year floodplain, but
Okay.
keep the 50-foot buffer there, because that starts, now you're,
But you felt like it was still worth keeping it in the ordinance, the 500-foot,
Well, I do.
I mean, the 500-year, yes.
As a group, that when we met on the 15th, it was felt it should be separated out but not removed
right.
from
But we
the
won't
village
go to the
law.
100 feet for the
Okay.
500-year floodplain, because that starts getting
Yeah.
extremely, we're a little town. So,
It's confusing.
and then the only other thing we should think about is,
Drafting that.
I think both Jeff and Robert felt like it might be worthwhile to put out an RFP to FP Clark or somebody else to because we have the map, right? And we've done a lot of work, and you guys have done the work, not me, but there's been a lot of work done on mapping out where the wetlands are right now. But they're a snapshot. The wetlands are moving all the time, really. So, we can go out and look and see where it's wet today, where there's scum cabbage today. A year from now, it may look a little bit different. So we want to make sure the language in the ordinance doesn't refer to a specific map from a specific date, but rather the most recent map. And what we wanted to do was perhaps make a baseline and see if we can't get a surveyor or somebody
So how does
to
that,
do that.
how does that relate to the county's map?
The county puts out floodplain maps, not village wetlands maps.
They don't?
That's correct. They've
Uh-huh.
done ours as a courtesy because we had something that wasn't digitized, and they've digitized it for us. But our wetlands control district that's referenced in our code makes it really clear that there still has to be some verification in the field. So
Right.
I'm not concerned about, the
Okay.
wetlands having sprawl and having other issues, because anytime we have to verify, we would have to at that point,
Right,
get
and
a
that was one of the things
confirmation.
we talked about during the meeting, was that no matter what, like this panel that we envisioned, right? No matter what, the ground truth out there would always
Right.
kind of win over what the map said, because the
Correct.
map may not be accurate after a period of time.
Correct, and our code protects
Allows
us
for
from
But
that.
should we invest in our own GIS info embedded map?
Yeah, we can do that.
Or would
could
the
do that.
county add that layer or accept that layer to their GIS system?
Well, when I met with the county mapping department, Libby and I have been in
Yeah.
there 4 or 5 times.
They've made a map.
We have a digitized
Yeah.
map, we have the printout of it, and the idea is a layer that goes on top of the county map.
So is that what you were talking about, Steve, with the idea of an RFP for a
Yeah, I
survey?
mean, it was really coming more from Jeff and Robert. They wanted to have something that was.
So is what,
I think Jeff Econom, the village engineer, was just looking for some verification of the data because of the the fact we were using county data, and the county data was based on some aerial
Uh-huh.
photography.
Right.
But the other way to approach that is to have a caveat that says, knowing that this was taken, this is county data, to the best of our ability, these are wetlands, and if you don't agree with this, then show us otherwise.
Right, which makes sense.
Which we don't have to do, that was just an idea. And
Right,
then,
I think
like Helen was saying, the idea would be, if the map says X, the ground truth wins. So if you
Understood.
are marked as being in a wetland and you don't
Right.
think it is, you come tell us
So
why,
the
and vice versa.
We're pretty comfortable with the map.
We keep a
the
map with,
CAC.
well, we consider it the general boundaries, you know,
Right, but is
so-
that a geospatial document, or is it just an illustration?
It's both. We have it now.
We have
Uh-huh.
it both ways.
Okay.
Yeah, we have
great.
it now on GIS.
Great. All right.
So that's what we'd like to do.
I think in the category of a public hearing that isn't about what ultimately it will be about, I think it's been a useful discussion.
Thank you for coming down, guys.
And we apologize for the confusion about
Yeah.
the public
When
hearing
are-
today.
When are we,
So we'll
when
notice.
should we 3 meet
So,
again?
so what we're hoping,
Is there
pending
no other comment?
the resolution of this,
Is
is
there
that
any other
is
comment?
that I'll ask that in a minute, but
Okay.
the strategy here would be to have a revised document for our next meeting, March 12, which would allow us to have a resolution to post a public hearing at a meeting following.
Okay, so Patty, is it possible to get language updates? I mean, who's feeding those language updates to you to then come back? You have the email that I shared and Robert Hughes updated. What else do you need?
Nothing else. I think
Okay.
we can work with those, and we
Right.
can do another draft and then get that out.
Okay.
So I think
Great.
we'll have enough time to put that together.
All right, thank you, Helen. Is there any
Thank you.
further comment on
Thank
this
you.
subject? All right, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, public hearing.
That's why we need a separate one.
Now we move on to the resolutions.
Yes.
Nicole, number 23.
Okay, resolve that the pre-check register dated February 26, 2018 is hereby approved as listed below. General Fund, $499,584. Water Fund, $167,240.10. Capital Fund, $36,358.02. Refuse Fund, $35,201.23. Trust Fund, $1,160.25 for a total of $739,543.60.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions on the check register?
I noticed that it's high, I think because of the pension fund contribution this time
Yeah.
around, right?
Pension contribution, tax cert being paid out,
Right.
and a new police car.
Not a common total, no.
No, that's a big number.
Higher than
Yeah.
normal.
Happily, we
Yeah.
don't spend this much every
No.
2 weeks. I just want to reassure you.
That'd be a problem.
Comments or
That's it.
questions? All in
Just an
favor?
observation. Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Steve, number 24.
Whereas the Village of Pleasantville has entered into an agreement with the SPCA of Westchester, Inc. to provide animal shelter care on an annual basis, and whereas due to major renovations starting in 2019, the SPCA will be scaling back operations and will only be able to provide a 7-month contract from June through December of 2018. And now therefore be it resolved that the village administrator is hereby authorized to sign the agreement with the SPCA of Westchester, Inc. to provide services to the village for seized, stray, and homeless dogs and cats in accordance with the terms of the agreement at a total cost of $2,787.33.
Is there a second?
Second.
Brian Scarstead, are you watching?
I always think of him when I read this.
Patty, what does that
Right,
mean?
what do we do
I didn't
after
I'm not
that?
following.
Right, after the 7 months.
Well, they're closing, so,
For renovation to reopen.
Reopening?
Temporary closure for
Right.
renovation.
so we will be compelled to find another shelter because.
Which isn't the biggest problem in the world because we
No, I
don't make
mean-
much use of it, right?
I think
Just go to
we've
another
not,
county,
but we
right?
still have to designate
Right.
someplace. That's
And
our
you go to Rockland
responsibility
or
under.
Dutchess or, I mean,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, how many times a year on average, let's say, or some estimate of how often we utilize this service. And the second thing is, I thought that we don't have an animal control officer. If you have an animal control issue here in Pleasantville, the town has an animal control officer that we utilize.
That responds here, yes.
So how does this work? Just curious how this all works for us when we do use them.
Well, because we do dog licensing under agriculture and markets law, we are required to have a shelter. So that's how this agreement came into.
So if
we no longer did dog licensing and turned that over to the town, then you would not have to have a shelter.
if there's an unlicensed, dog that's out roaming around and somebody calls, they get to town, the town animal control officer picks them up and brings them over here, that's on our dime because it was on our property, it was in our village?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
How much do we bring in licenses?
Not very much, maybe $150, $200.
So is there a reason that we continue to do that and then we have to pay a couple $1,000 and
We've had
not
that discussion.
not defer it to the town?
We think it's better. It's something that the board should consider as a matter of policy. I think the thinking early on was not to have our residents inconvenienced by going to town hall for something we could do here.
You
It's
have to
not
go
that-
there for your taxes, you have to, I mean.
Right.
But we're not
it's not
getting,
like it's 50 miles away
we're
either.
we're only getting $150 in dog license applications because people are not licensing their dogs. It's not that we don't have dogs, we have lots of dogs in this village. People are just not licensing them, so do we care? Does it matter?
Do we care if they license their dogs?
Yes,
Well, it's a law.
It's a law, you're in
But-
violation of
but
it.
Because we have a
So
law, do we need to have that, my question generally is, do we need to have that law? People aren't doing it anyway.
Well, it's state law, it's not ours. We just administer this on behalf of the state of New York. All the
Somebody has
clerks
to do it, town
Yeah.
or the village.
All the
But
clerks
what I'm
administer
saying-
this,
but
just
what
like
I'm
we give
saying
out
is
birth
if-
and death
If
certificates,
you're
it's
only
for the
taking in a
state.
couple $100 and we're paying out several thousand,
Because
why
we
do we
don't
let the
enforce the
town
law,
do
because we
it?
don't enforce the law.
It's a
That's
state law
okay.
that says all town clerks must do this,
Yeah, yeah,
but if you have
I
a
get
village, a
that.
village clerk may do it, so we've been doing it for a
Right,
very
sure.
long
And if we
time.
didn't do it, they would have that obligation with the
Yeah.
town.
But,
Yeah, the
but,
town does this as well.
but
They
here's
do-
the thing.
They do license.
If we determine not to license dogs
Mm-hmm.
here, and 4 people from the village go over to the village, to the town hall and license their dog, and everybody else just doesn't do it, they're in violation of the state law, but we don't enforce that state law anyway. Nobody gets a ticket for having an unlicensed dog in this village. We just don't do
Well, there
it.
is a violation in the law, so if someone could get a violation, we are not doing it.
We're not enforcing it anyway.
Right.
So
Well, the
I don't
question
know,
is-
it's just, I'm wondering, I agree with Colleen, like, we're
Well,
engaging
so-
in a
Right,
licensing
this is a fine.
program that brings us in $120. We don't do any enforcement, and yet we incur $3,000 in costs.
So can I suggest this as a way forward?
Sure.
One of the issues is what the cost implications would be for the town if we handed over this responsibility. So it's a discussion we ought to
That's
have
a
to
good
them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm guessing that some piece of this ASPCA fee that we have typically paid would then get folded into whatever fee they pay, assuming they have a similar arrangement. Because the
So they would want reimbursement
ASPCA
anyway.
divides up these things based on, community size all across the county. So
So they would be looking for
how about this?
reimbursement anyway, so you're right about that.
Maybe the useful story here is that because this is just a 7-month agreement, not the whole year agreement, it provides a reasonable timeline for us to reach out to the town, have a conversation with them about what their view of the whole thing is, and see whether there's a way to streamline it.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
against this
Yeah,
agreement.
no, I
I'm just saying
understand.
it's a conversation worth having if
Yeah.
I
we
think it
can-
is, we both think it, I mean, we think that you
Okay.
should consider
Most
talking to the
villages
town.
turned them on. When the law changed and gave the responsibility to the clerks to do the licensing, most villages in Westchester County had to turn them over to their subsequent town. I'm correct, Eric, on that?
All right, so
Okay. It's a good
let's,
conversation to have.
yeah, I agree. And so we'll have that conversation with the town of Mount Pleasant and see where that goes. So all in favor of number 24?
All right.
Aye, motion approved. 25, Colleen.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign the First Amendment to the 2015-2020 snow and ice agreement with Westchester County as per the terms set forth in their agreement number 15-958.
Is there a second?
Second.
So this is just same old, Patty?
Yeah, nothing new coming from this. We've been partnering with the county for,
Sign the engagement letter with Keith Patensky Esquire for legal services regarding a wireless telecommunication facility at 345 Castleton Street, as per the terms set forth in his engagement letter dated February 2nd, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
So Patty, this is regarding our legal circumstance for the cell tower.
yeah, if we have any, we have several leases, as the board knows, on that monopole on Castleton Street with a number of providers. T-Mobile is there, Verizon, Sprint. OmniPoint.
Right, which is to say, it's not our pole, but because
Correct.
it's on our property, we're entitled to have these leases and gain benefit.
Yes. And every once in a while, the carriers need to come and do maintenance on those antennas that are inside that pole. And when they do, there are all kinds of conditions that we compel them to undertake in order to be sure that they are doing things properly. And we also have a code that requires certain things take place. But we need special counsel to review their permits because we don't necessarily have that expertise, and we want to be sure they're in compliance with all of the regulations we set forth. Keith Potensky's firm has that expertise. We've used them in the past under Turner and Turner, if you remember that name. Keith was the partner that always handled those matters, and now he's independent from Turner and Turner, and we would like him to at least be able to handle these matters as they come up. Most of the time, his expenses would be borne by the applicants.
Right.
So we just need, for an audit purpose, to have the, reference to an authorization here, to be able to at least retain him.
Understood. Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 27. Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes a stipend of $10,000 for engineering services provided by Jeffrey Econom, P.E., effective February 26, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jeff Econom, as many of you know, is our superintendent of public works. He is also a professional engineer and has provided extraordinarily beneficial services to us that prior to his arrival here we had to seek from outsourced consultants. So recognizing the benefit his professional engineer license provides, we are proposing a stipend of $10,000 a year added to his base pay. Comments, questions?
I'm just going to say that the amount of service that he's provided us on an annual basis so far exceeds $10,000. That is well worth. It's well worth compensating him for what he does for us in this.
And the money he saves.
I would agree. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. 27, Steve.
28.
I'm sorry, 28. Yes.
28. Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign the agreement with Pamal Broadcasting, DBA 107.1 The Peak, for services related to the 2018 Pleasantville Music Festival, and as detailed in their agreement dated February 23rd, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is a renewal of agreement we've had with the Peak for the last several years in this form. They are our primary broadcast partner and provide radio spots that not only assist in promoting the music festival, but also give recognition to music festival sponsors. Comments or questions?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 29, colleagues.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes of the meeting held on January 22, 2018, and February 5, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. That's the last of our regular agenda resolutions. Is there a motion to go into executive session on the MTA Metro North substation acquisition and easement?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. We'll be heading into executive session. Thank you all for your attention. Congratulations to Joe Zane, newly appointed to the position of detective. Congratulations to Eric Morrissey,
Yep.
newly
Thank you.
appointed to the position of administrator. We look forward to a long and productive run. Congratulations to Patty and Judy as their impending retirements approach. More on that later. And be reminded that in this room a week from today, Monday, March 5 at 7 p.m., will be a very useful presentation on our streetscape and Manville Road Civic and Memorial Plaza civic space improvements. So that's Monday, March 5, 7 p.m. right here. Thank you and good night.